appreciate everybody being here tonight. This is we'll consider it a special meeting. We have given proper notice. It is posted on the Public Works website, and all that was required for this to be a legal meeting according to OPMS. So appreciate everybody being here. We'll do a roll call. Councilman Busenbark here, Councilman Ryder here, Councilman Barrett here, Councilman White here, and Councilman Allen here. And we've asked Councilman Busenbark to give us a prayer, and then if you would follow me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Our dear Heavenly Father, we're grateful to meet as a city council to discuss the needs of Roosevelt City. We hope and pray Thy Spirit will be with us as we discuss the city manager position and discuss other needs in the Roosevelt area. We're grateful for this city we live in, for the people that live therein as well. We hope and pray that we'll be able to serve them to the best of our abilities. We're grateful for this land that we live in, the freedoms we enjoy, and hope and pray that we'll always enjoy them. And we say this in the name of Thy Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So I guess we can go ahead with our public comment period. If there's anyone in the public who would like to, or in the, what do you call that, audience, who would like to comment for 3 minutes, now is your chance. If anyone here would like to take that off. Seeing none, we'll move to the next agenda item, which is the city manager hire discussion. So had a visit with Grant and Ryan a little earlier today, and I'll just tee it off with this, and then we can move forward as appropriate. But so as we were discussing this previously, we just wanted to make sure that we were following proper protocol. After a conversation that I had with Grant today, it sounds like because the council did authorize me to work with Mercer Group, we had the three of us first choose Mercer Group, and then they had authorized me to work with Mercer Group to narrow down the pool. We did the interviews openly and everything else. Plus, there was a set salary range that we were to work within. So everything that's been done up to this point has pretty much fallen. We're okay. As far as following our ordinances and guidelines, that was one of the concerns that we wanted to make sure that was followed properly. And so with that, Melissa and I have negotiated to a certain point, and we feel like we're far enough along in the process that one, we won't need a closed session meeting. Two, we can probably just propose what he's willing to accept, and then after speaking with Grant as well, we can make the appointment tonight and finalize that decision or not. And so it can be a pretty quick process. Obviously, after we had the interviews and everything and discussing those things with the council, come on in. Do you want to get the role?
That's what I was looking for.
And having gone through that process, it was narrowed down, and we have entered into negotiation with Scott. I think everybody was aware of that. And so we've been negotiating with him. I guess the first question is, are there any concerns from the council with moving forward with him, or at least moving forward with negotiations with him? Okay. And so I guess the next step would be, Melissa, do you want to share with the council what he has requested, and then we can discuss that?
Sure. So, do I stand up?
Sure.
It's easier here. Okay, so he, after speaking back and forth a little bit, negotiating, he actually drafted an email and sent it to me that kind of lays out his requirements or what he wants to accept the position. Okay, so starting annual salary of $110,000 with a performance review at 6 months, and depending on merit, a possible raise to 115 annually. And then once he hits that 115, he'll just go to the COLA schedule, but all the other employees do. He would like to start with 2 weeks paid vacation. Our other employees start with 1 week's paid vacation, just for reference. Sick leave would be the same as Roosevelt City policy, and then all of the other benefits, same as what every other employee gets. He wants to be certified as a reserve police officer with Roosevelt City, not to do police work, just to attend the 40 hours of training that's required to keep his post certification. And he does lay out that he would do that after normal business hours. So that would be on his time. He would just be certified with the city to keep his post certification. There was some discussions regarding a severance, a guaranteed severance for a no-cause termination. However, in lieu of that, he's got 20 and a half years as a post-certified, 22 years, okay, as an officer. So he can technically retire as an officer. But I guess with URS, if you're an officer and you're certified as public safety, because their retirement is different with URS, and then you go and work as non-public safety, when you retire with URS, if you're in that non-public safety group, then you would have to have your 30 years of retirement instead of the 20. I don't know if that makes sense. It's kind of confusing. So we did a little.
Explain that a little bit.
So
Or
public safety retirement with URS is for tier 1, which is what he is 20 years of service. And then he can retire with a full pension from Utah State Retirement. Now, if you are not public safety, if you're just a civilian employee with URS, you're required to have 30 years to receive a full pension. So when he comes, let's say he comes to work for us, we'll have to certify him as non-public safety because he's not going to be in a public safety role. So he'll technically be receiving the 30-year requirement pension. Does that kind of make sense?
yeah, and I can even add to that just because I've talked to him and a few others. So what happens? So what he's afraid of is if he's doing this in lieu of the severance because according to our ordinances, the severance is difficult. We could change some things and make it happen, but also that's kind of frowned on at this time. So this was his idea, and what he's afraid of is that if he loses his certification, then he forgoes that potential retirement. So the only way he can get retirement is if he were to quit or take his retirement right now and wait a full year before he took another position, or if he can maintain his certification. If in the future, if we wanted to make a change with the city manager and he was still certified, then he could still take that retirement and not lose it. Does that make sense? So instead of a severance, he's saying, if you'll just certify me as a reserve officer so that I can maintain that certification, then that protects me from losing all that 20 years and doesn't make me work another 8 years to receive this.
To get the 30 years.
To get the 30-year retirement.
Yeah, so what he would like us to do is the way he words it, is if either party wishes to terminate employment at any time during his tenure as city manager, the city agrees to immediately recertify his employment to the position of full-time sworn police officer. I will then immediately turn in the request to Utah Retirement System to start the retirement process. The estimated time for this process would be between 2 and 6 weeks, depending on URS requirements. While employed as a police officer for that short period of time, the salary would be re-entered or would be changed to an entry-level officer. So basically what he's asking for is that even if he quits or whatever happens, that we would go into URS and make him a full-time police officer so that he gets put back under that public safety retirement system. And then he would basically, whatever Rick tells him to do until it's registered with URS, and then he'll retire. Does that make sense? Is there any questions about that? It's kind of confusing, I
Are
know.
there any, is there any concerns that Grant or Rich?
No, the only question I would have, and I'm sure it's, he would not be on the public safety rate, right? Until that happened.
Until that happened,
Yeah,
that's
he
correct.
would be on the tier 1 rate, which is about 18.5% right now.
Instead of the 29%.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah, he won't be receiving public safety retirement as the city manager.
No.
No.
And one other thing I need to make sure that is not in his thing, but I discussed with him,
Mm-hmm.
is that I made it known to him that if we fired him for cause, there's no requirement for us to hire. Does that make sense? That's only if we decide without cause to let him go, or he decides to quit, then he can be employed for the 2 to 6 weeks until the retirement process is done. But that if he was fired for cause and it was a kind of a bad thing, that we would not then hire him as a police officer.
Then he would lose that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
he
so we
lose
would
that.
need to make that real clear, because it says at any time for any reason, so what we could rewrite that.
Right, and he agreed. I
That's
visited with him yesterday, and he
Okay.
agreed, yeah, he says, if I'd done something wrong, then I get that. And so
Sure.
I just want to make sure that if it was if it was a bad thing, not that I don't, I mean, he's probably watching, and I know Scott, he probably wouldn't do anything like that, but if it was something that would have brought a lot of focus and negative light to the city, I don't think that it would be proper to then
No.
offer him a position even for that time. So, and he realizes that, so,
You don't want to reward bad behavior.
yeah. And so he realizes that, and he's okay with that as well. So I think, as part of our motion, we would that would be a little bit of a tweak that we want to make sure that it would still just be without cause, like if we let him go without cause.
Or a voluntary severance.
Or a voluntary
Or
severance,
termination, yeah.
then we would bring him on long enough for him to go through that process.
Sure. Would it be appropriate to talk about kind of his plans for his family?
Yeah.
Is that okay?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, so I just wanted to make sure that everybody understands kind of his plan, so that you're not surprised later. In speaking with him, and he mentioned it in the interview as well, that his girls play competitive soccer, out in Harriman or wherever he lives. And, it's a really big deal to him. So when we first started discussing the offer, one of the things that he said was that he had spoken with his wife, and his intention was to come to Roosevelt and likely purchase a home. But his children and his wife would stay in the home that they own now at the city to finish the soccer season. It's a long soccer season. They just started it. Obviously, his kids just started school. Anyway, so that was the first part of the conversation. Then later through the conversation, as we were kind of going back and forth, he did mention that it would be probably at least 2 years. And then it kind of got longer than that with with the intention for his family. Now, I think his employment, he assured me and the mayor both that he intends on being here. He's in it for the long haul. It's not a stepping stone. It's not a temporary thing for him. However, he would really like to leave his family where they are so that his girls can play at this competitive level that they're playing at currently. I think his oldest is 13, so that's a long time. Now, I don't know if that is what will happen. You can't, see the future, but I do want you to understand that there's a possibility that his family doesn't move to Roosevelt.
Yeah. And I think what he told me too is his family obviously would be here, on any time off or during the summer or anything else.
Right.
And when we visited yesterday as well, he said, they really want to just get this year behind because there may be other opportunities to present themselves. So it's kind of an unknown.
Mm-hmm.
Going and talking to his references and those types of things, my impression is that what he says he's going to do, that's what he's going to do. I mean, his wife, I visited with her yesterday as well, and she says, I'm going to see more, even though he's you know, he lives out there during the week, and even if we're here, I'm gonna see him more than I see him now, because he's gonna have every weekend with us, where, you know, when I was talking to people and they were saying he was working 70 to 80 hours a week, like, he really was working 70 to 80 hours a week. And so, yeah, I don't know that, to me, as long as he's a resident here and he has a
Right.
home and he does what we need him to do,
Yeah, from the sounds of it, that doesn't break any ordinance, he'll own a home in Roosevelt City, or rent, or whatever the case is, he'll live in Roosevelt City, but, the longer I live here, the more I realize how much us Roosevelt City Basemites really love our community. And so I just wanted everyone to be aware of that, his wife and kids may never move out here, so.
I think they will. Just not
I hope so,
immediately.
I hope so.
His plan also is, he says he definitely wants to be here a minimum of 4, and he would love to be here 8.
Mhm.
But obviously that's, the council gets to decide that. But that's his plan. When he says this is his last job, that's what he means. Because he has the 8 years that he has to put in until he can receive the other tier or the other retirement. And that is his plan, is to be somewhere 8. So.
So I think that's it as far as what I have. Any questions about what he's asking for, or?
If he worked as a non-officer for the 8 years, then the retirement would be the same.
Yeah, I think it'd be.
He wouldn't have to go through the
Yes.
retirement of police officer.
Yeah, that's correct, because then he would just be able to retire.
Any other questions?
No?
Okay. So, yes, Grant.
I think there are a couple of issues that I just want to make sure you're aware of before you make your decisions. One, with the family living in different locations, it's going to create a gray area on domicile, and it could be questioned. You could be challenged on whether or not that qualifies as living in Roosevelt the way that your ordinance says. So if you approve it, I'd be ready for that to come later on. The other one is I'm a little bit concerned about there being what amounts to a contract between the council and him with the conditions that he's setting when we just barely changed the ordinance to eliminate the contract. As a matter of contract law, there's offers and acceptance. My advice would be to not accept what he put in his email as the offer. I would make your own offer and then leave it for him to accept. With the conversation JR and I had earlier, and he's cleared it with Rick, I don't see any problem with him working, doing the training hours with the police department. I am seeing some problem with saying, okay, if I'm ever terminated, now you put me in as a police officer. We don't know if we're gonna have positions. We don't know who the current chief will be at the time. And that's really a decision for the department head, not for the council, the hiring and firing within the department itself. I have no problem if ultimately that's what happens. It's just that we just got rid of the contract, and now I don't think we can make a promise because that amounts to a contract in and of itself. So I would make an offer to him, not just accept this, and which would specify the salary. I would not make any promises on future in the police department, but at the same time would not be doing anything to say, no, we won't agree to that, and think that if anything ever happened, which I think is unlikely in and of itself, that then we would try to accommodate him, but I don't think we want anything binding the city right now in the way that he's proposing.
Yeah, and I looked at that as well, and you're right about the severance for sure. The contract is, yeah, that's a gray area, and that's something that we can look at in the future. You know, looking at some of the reasons why we got rid of the contract clause, well, it didn't say we couldn't do a contract, it just, in our ordinance, it used to say that there's, it even said the city manager's salary in the contract and everything else, where really, looking in the state code, the city manager's salary should be set in an ordinance, not a contract. And so there's a couple of things that were there, but, and I think talking with him, you know, I think there's something, it is hard, and that's why I talked to Rick before we even offered him, or could make the offer to keep him on as a reserve officer, is because, you know, Rick's the department head at this time, not to step on any toes. So I don't know if it's a possibility in the future that we could eventually make that. I would want to make something, if I was in his position, 80 to 90% of city managers have a contract with severance in it. Now, the old contract that I have here is awful because the severance was non-conditional. We could fire him for cause or not cause, and he still got the severance, which is horrible. However, to also attract good talent, we have to be competitive with the market. And so by not offering a severance, it puts us at a disadvantage to get somebody in. We're going to get, if we offer subpar benefits, then we're going to get subpar talent.
I believe in our current ordinance, it says at the time of termination, the council would determine severance.
Right.
Yeah.
And I don't guess that you can do that before the fact,
No.
but at the time, then we could. But we just couldn't promise something.
Yeah, and so, with what he's requested, if at the time that his employment was terminated, then he'd still need department head approval because the department head control. But then you could do something like he's asking, it's just do it in advance.
And that's my thing, if we don't do the severance, he's thought of a way that he can satisfy his need as far as, okay, if he's terminated without cause, then he's foregoing not only this retirement, but then he's not also getting a severance. So in lieu of that, he's saying, well, if I could just do this. And to me, I would like to see something at some point that's a little more fixed. Like we can do that now as far as saying, yeah, you can come on as a reserve thing, but I would still like to see if there's something that we could do. And maybe we can't offer that right now, but maybe that's something we could work on in the near future.
I definitely think you could. The concerns that I pointed out, I think that all of you got my email with them, but is that we just barely changed the ordinances. This is our first run through them, and so they may need to be tweaked after. But I think we're in a far better position to do it after a decision's made on this first one, and then you're making changes based on what you learned rather than changing them in advance of the first time that they're being used.
So maybe you could compromise, and this is just as the council feels comfortable, that we offer him the position, we tell him that as of now, yes, he could be hired as a reserve officer, and that we would look at working on a way to make that a permanent solution so that he doesn't have to worry. And I talked to him about that yesterday. I said, you may just have to have a little faith in that we will take care of you if you take care of us, type of thing. And it may take us a few months or whatever to implement some of those things, but I feel like that's a fair, and I think you would be okay with that.
What, the question that I had is in changing our ordinance, disallowing a contract with the city manager, that seems like it didn't work out the way we wanted it to, because now we're not able to do some things that normally a contracted employee you could treat a little bit differently.
Well, and that's a tough one, because I'm looking at the old one, and it says that the so in 204020 and it says the appointment of a person be known as city manager. Anyway, once approved by the city council, the mayor shall sign the contract entered into. So it does mention a contract there, and then in 030, it talks about the term, and here's where this is really touched. So one, it takes out the word contract in that, so it doesn't really specify we can or can't have one. But when it's talking about the term in 204030, so it says the manager shall serve at the pleasure of the governing body. The term of employment may be renewed at any time. And his term, his contract was 3 years. And so that was an automatic renewal too, which in 2008, really his contract in that regard is null and void, because in 2008, the state law changed that said you cannot have an automatic renewal contract. And so anyway, it says the term of employment may be renewed at any time, which was 3 years at the time, but it was an automatic renewal. And now it says that the city manager shall be without definite term. And so there was another place though, it said without term. I thought, yeah, without definite term, and shall be at a salary to be fixed by the city council. So it basically says that there is a term, but I don't know if the term means not a contract or if the term means there's no set amount of years that he's guaranteed. So I don't know. It's really it's kind of vague.
A little bit, but with the changes that you made, where it specified contract before, and then you take that out, it would be implied that you've eliminated the contract. And to say that without an unspecified term, if there were a contract, there would be a specified term. So I see where you're coming from, JR, but I think by far the safest interpretation is that you've eliminated the contract with the changes.
So he's just an employee.
Right.
Well, yeah.
So can I speak to this a little bit? So I helped draft this ordinance with Grant and you know, given the last city manager, you know, contract, nothing in particular, but the contract, there was extra privileges that he had above and beyond other employees that kind of seemed a little bit like, I just felt if he was going to be an employee of the city, he needed to be treated like other employees of the city. And Grant and I talked about that a little bit and how to do that. And me personally, the way that this is drafted now, I agree with not entering into a contract the way that we did with the previous city manager, because it protects the city. It protects, you know, basically we don't put ourselves in a bad situation where we feel like we can't, you know, appoint a new city manager. And I feel like at this point, you know, as we move forward after we've hired this guy, I'd like to maybe propose at some point that we put in an ordinance that allows us to at least negotiate a severance, because when you're trying to negotiate and bring in the best talent, you need something that has teeth to really entice them, because they're moving their whole family, they're making a huge investment into our community, they're buying a home. And if we get rid of them without cause, just because we get a new mayor, he doesn't want the guy and wants to appoint his own city manager, you know, that's reasonable. But it would be at the cost of his livelihood in general. You know, he'd lose a lot. He'd have to find a job without any severance or anything. And so I just think that we should in the future propose an ordinance. I mean, I'd be happy to do it in the near future. Just because it was an oversight, I think, on our part, is to not include that as a possibility. But we could maybe change the verbiage instead of upon termination. We could change it to, you know, the contract may be in there for this purpose only or something like that. And so, anyway.
Can I speak to that too? Because really the situation that we're in right now, I mean, it's not even that we're wanting to create a contract. We're just wanting to give our word that a certain thing will happen.
That's what a contract is.
Well, I understand that. But the problem is any employee that we hire, we have a contract with that employee. We have a set amount that we're going to pay them that we've agreed upon, which entails a contract. They say, you come to work and you provide this service, and we're going to provide this amount of money. Now that's a contract. How is that not a contract or an agreement? And they're both one and the same. And so there may be different conditions. I'm gonna pay this guy 50,000 and I'm going to pay that guy 20. That's a contract. I contract to that person for hire.
So is there something, I agree with that, is there something in a new employee that comes and works for the city, actually signs that says this is gonna be your pay, this is the leave
Yes, there
policy?
is.
This is, so technically that sounds like a contract, so couldn't we just use that same form that the city employees use and adjust it accordingly for the city manager?
It is a little bit different though, because this is a true at-will position, at the will of the council. For government employees, that's not quite the same.
I think too, the thing that you brought up in your email was that unless you're willing to treat every employee the same, with the same type of,
Yeah, and we talked, there have been,
You just mentioned how this is different. So how are you to treat every employee the same if you're going to treat this employee different? Because they're an at-will strictly. So you either treat them the same.
that's the way you wrote it into your ordinances.
But we didn't. What we did is we eliminated the word contract, but we didn't say we couldn't have a contract.
No, yeah, we didn't expressly say that he didn't have a contract. What I'm talking about is different, is where this is that he's serving in an appointed position, which is at will, a true at will. And that's what I'm saying is different from other governmental employees. There's a difference between an appointed position and a hired position.
But what I'm saying is the interpretation of not being able to do a contract because we've removed the word contract in our ordinance is an interpretation. And to be completely honest, I got two other professional opinions on that. The only thing that they were really concerned about was the severance. Contract, not necessarily at all. And so if we want to go that route, like, my personal opinion is you can't hire an individual without a verbal even agreement or some type of agreement between how much they're going to get paid. I mean, even agreeing to the 2 weeks vacation versus just the 1 week is, from what you're saying, overstepping our bounds in that. And to me, that's not what was intended with this necessarily. The 6-page contract that we had, and I don't know who
I've still never even seen it.
drafted it.
Nobody's ever shown it to me to this
But-
day.
Well, and that's the thing is so, that's kind of scary in and of itself, because you were here. at the
I
time.
wasn't here. Well, you were as city attorney, but I wasn't kept in the loop.
And that's what I mean,
Yeah.
is you were contracted with the city at the time when this was created. And, you know, for example,
And they didn't even tell you.
They didn't tell you to
So-
review it.
let me just.
Huh, no wonder it was a problem.
Well, then let me just read this. The employee cannot be reassigned from the position of city manager to another position without the employee's express written consent. So, I mean, so if we wanted to, this is a 6-page document that we had as a contract that we wanted to get away from as far as these types of things. Severance in here. Employees shall receive severance pay when employment is terminated as defined in section 9. If the employee is terminated, the employer shall provide a minimum severance payment equal to 6 months' salary at the then current rate. It doesn't say anything about for cause, no cause. It just says if he's terminated for any cause, for any reason, he gets 6 months. So there was things in here, if we said his annual rate, it can't be any less than what his current rate is. I mean, it was completely in the favor of the city manager, not the city. And we're not trying to do that with this. All we're saying is we need to be reasonable. And if we have to, I think Scott's willing to take the position, knowing that we will make an effort to put something in writing at some point in time that would at least give him peace of mind. If we can't offer that to him I'll be honest, I don't know who would come to work for us if we can't have a simple agreement, just that, I mean, we're talking a paragraph versus 6 pages, so.
Well, it sounds to me like the process from here is to offer what we can offer and then rework our ordinance so it allows us to, in the future, put in specific terms of a contract or whatever. And I'm okay
And
with
that's,
that.
it sounds like that's all we can do is make the offer, the best offer we can make. And then see if he takes it or not. And with that, I would say if we're willing to make him an offer, if we can accept the offer, I don't know if we can make the appointment tonight. You know,
I think you can, it would just be conditioned on him
accepting the offer.
Yeah.
So we can still make him an offer. We may not be able to promise, but could we say that we would hire him as a reserve, or is that?
Yeah, because you've got the department head already here saying that he would do it for now, so I think that part of it's covered.
So it's just the hiring him for the 2 weeks to 6 weeks upon termination that we'd have to work.
Yeah, because that's beyond the council's authority, the way the ordinances are currently written, that's a department head issue. And you don't know if it's ever gonna come into play, and if it does, who the department head would be, because it would be the department head at the time, not the current department.
And Rick, I guess for now, would you be okay doing that as long as he wasn't fired for cause? Would you be okay doing that
If I was here when that
if you
happened.
were here? Okay. And that, the only reason I ask is so that at least that gives us an idea. And then if we did form that, we would just have the next department, you know, if you weren't here, whoever would take your spot, I mean, that would be something that we can give to them, but this is an agreement we have already in place, just so you know. We have, you know, so that it's,
I'm hoping we can propose make the change to the ordinance Title II for severance, and I hope we could enter a contract specifically for severance.
he would rather have this anyway.
Yeah, he kind of thought this would work out
And
better.
to be honest with you, this really is a win-win for the city because the severance is gonna cost us $60,000 to $70,000. This, even if we were to hire him for 2 to 6 weeks at the entry-level pay,
Yeah.
is gonna cost us a couple grand.
If that, yeah.
So it's 60 to 70,000 if we do the severance, or a couple $1,000s. And to him, it's a benefit because then he can keep his retirement through that.
Mhm.
So it's a win-win for both, really. And it's a way to kind of not have the severance contract with him, which is a positive. So it really is kind of,
Roosevelt City, we use URS for our employees.
Yes,
I didn't know that.
required by law to do that.
I didn't know it was recorded for the city. I
Mhm.
didn't understand that.
If I may just add, in my county experience, I mean, we have appointed positions as well, obviously, right, at-will positions. And there's like never been anything attached to that, right? If you're at-will, you're at-will, and if they want to hire you, you do, and that's the end of it. And so when we first started talking about it, I was like, this is bizarre. So I did reach out
I
to,
remember talking to you
Yes.
and you had that reaction.
like, that's the point of the position, like, good luck, you know? Anyways, I did reach out to HR directors, like every city that I had a contact information. I think there was about 75 emails I sent out asking other city HR people if their city manager has a contract, and if so, what does it say? And out of those, I probably got around 15 to 20 responses, and every single one of them had an employment contract with their city manager. And I don't know why it is so different than county government, because the county people wrote back and was like, no, our at-will positions are at-will. Obviously, not gonna redo the ordinance now, but I do agree that at some point you should relook at that, because you are gonna have a competitiveness issue, with people with that experience and all that, because if every city offers some sort of contract with some perks that other employees don't get and we don't, they're gonna take those other city manager positions. Anyways, for what it's worth, it's not, what he's asking for is not really unusual, when you look at other cities and what they offer to their city managers. Again, at a later date, now would not be the appropriate time, but I do think it's something you need to revisit.
And I
I
think,
think the sorry. I was just gonna say, I think that when we changed the ordinances, we knew, at least I knew when we were
Okay, I
drafting,
didn't know.
that we were gonna be in the minority with what we were doing, but it
Okay.
was in response to a problem that we had had with the prior city manager, and we were wanting to avoid it. So it looks like the pendulum may have swung too far the other direction and be making it hard for us to compete. We can correct that, but as I said in the email, I don't recommend you do it right now. I think you do it after the.
And I think, I agree with Grant, because this 6-page document was such a shocker. Like, I think in my feeling was, I know I was shifted that, depending on over that direction as well, even though I was concerned. I think I even voiced those concerns about being competitive at the time. But, and that's one thing I think really Scott has come up with a solution that I think is very reasonable. And not only reasonable, but it solves the majority of our issues. Obviously, maybe not that one little caveat at the end, but really it puts us in a really good position. And to find somebody else like that would be willing to come on board without a more formal agreement, I think we'd be hard pressed. And so it's just the nature that he has some flexibility with what he has, that he's able to kind of.
Well, I have a suggestion then, maybe a partially formulated motion. At 6 months, we would reevaluate his salary. I think at that time, then we would have also
Something to finalize.
new wording in our ordinance that we can at that time put in place, whatever changes we need to make.
I think that's fair.
I think in ordinance, we should specify what can be in the contract.
Yeah, because
And
that's,
say, if it's not specified here, we can't put it. I think severance is one thing we could do. But potentially, I don't know, maybe one or two things that would vitally important in meetings like that, but not put in a whole bunch of things. I think 2 weeks vacation from the start, that's a great way to negotiate. I think that's something we should offer.
Grant, can we do that now?
I don't really think that you can, but I like Dustin's idea of 6 months. Wrapping that up into it at that point too.
So maybe.
Because then that would give us time to amend ordinances and expressly allow it. My concern now is it's not expressly disallowing it, as JR pointed out, but I'm sticking with what I had said, in spite of how many people you've talked to about it. If you take something out of your ordinance, the presumption is that you intended to take it out. And so when you take out contract and you don't put anything about it back in, and then you've got another term saying that there is an indefinite term, which would not be typical of a contract, I think it's strongly implied that you can't right now. But I think those are things that we can easily address. And I like the suggestion Dustin's making to do it at 6 months. But then one other thing, when I got to the floor, is where the council can't really bind the police department as far as the employee decisions. What I'd recommend is that you guys put together what you can offer and what you decide you want to in a motion, and then we can include a letter from the department head saying that he will allow him to reserve. And Rick could even go further than that, saying that for as long as he's in the position, that he would also be willing to bring him on if his employment terminates. And so that would be an alternative way that we can do it, that I don't see legal issues with. We're having the council do it. I think there are some problems.
And then if within 6 months we iron those things out, then that may
it's, relevant at that.
Can we make the offer that in 6 months we can review and negotiate a potential? I guess we
I don't know
can.
what we're doing for the county, but I think for the city, are we doing that anyway with employees?
Yes.
Yeah, so there's already kind of a
6
precedent
month
for that
probationary
anyway.
period. Mhm.
Because at that point in time, I think we'll have the ability to negotiate a contract with them, like just based on the things that are expressly allowed, if we move that direction.
So Melissa, do we have that in a written policy for the city? Do you know off the top of your head? It's been the,
I can look, I got the phone, give me a few minutes. I'll look.
I know that it's been the practice, so I feel like a precedent is already set. If we have a policy, the reason I'm asking is it would make it really easy for your motion to just say pursuant to whatever the policy is. And then you're applying that to the city manager position expressly.
So let me ask a question real quick. So I think we're down to the nitty gritty. I think honestly, we can figure out a way. I mean, we're close as far as that goes. So I guess my question is, do we want to move forward with Scott? And if so, let's start to formulate a motion that would include some of those things that we talked about, that is clear and concise, that can be, recorded, and then move forward with the appointment if that's what everyone agrees. So I guess the first question is, do we want to move forward with Scott? And then,
I just want to, and this may be my personal problem that I have. I have 3 pilots that live out here a week at a time that are not engaged in the community and have no vested interest in this community. And so that gives me the perception that I'm the only guy that doesn't have 1 foot in, 1 foot out. Both my feet are right here. And so
until
that,
next year.
it's a different issue. But, so am I the only one that kind of, home is where the heart is, and maybe I'm too tainted by the idea that I can't get pilots to live here and commit to being part of the community. And so maybe it's just me, if nobody else has a problem with that.
Well, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Have you talked to Scott?
No.
Okay.
I'm just going by what you guys have said,
Well,
where it went 6 months and then
So,
2 years and then,
and the
and
reason
then maybe never.
And the reason I asked you that is because I've asked him those questions, and I hope you got the text and said he's gonna be out. If you want to talk to him, you should call him, meet up with him, whatever. Because those questions that you're asking, he could answer himself much better than I can. But I asked him those same questions, and he says, as far as all your events and everything else, weekends, like, we're gonna be there. During the week, it's not even the school and the actual community. What it is the ability for his daughter to play that competitive league. So we even talked about forming that type of a league here. There's already a team that plays in Vernal. He's thinking about, well, maybe I can get my daughter on the Vernal's team. So he's trying to figure out ways to do that quicker. He's very honest in the sense that he's not going to tell you something you want to hear so that he gets the job. He's being very honest and upfront. So when he says, I'm going to be here, I'm going to do this, I do believe him. And based on, I called every single one of his references that he had, and they all told me the same thing. So I don't have an issue with it because I've talked to him for, I bet I've talked to him for 8 or 10 hours, realistically, like face to face. I've talked to him on the phone. I've called all of his references, spent hours and hours on the phone with his references, checking his story, checking his everything. So personally, I get what your concern is. I don't have that same concern because I've talked to him and I understand what he feels, what his feelings are. That's why we had that opportunity we had several interviews. He made himself available to whomever wanted to ask him those questions. So I get your question and it's a valid concern. I just wish that he was here or you could talk to him personally and get that question answered.
But without his input, my concern is that maybe somebody in the public would say, well, the city manager did this because his kids aren't even in the school here. The city manager did this because he doesn't care. His kids doesn't play soccer here. The city manager may say, they may say the city manager did this because his wife doesn't shop at the grocery store. I mean, I think that's the whole idea that we put behind the city manager living in Roosevelt was that they really understand 100% from the dog they own to that's pooping on the neighbor's lawn to the site, all of those things involved. So that's all I wanted to say. I don't say I don't like him or wouldn't hire him. I wanted to get that on record that
Oh, no, I don't disagree, and I appreciate the comment. I'm just saying I wish to have those conversations with you.
So I've thought a little bit about this because he's basically an executive. He's got a master's in public administration from BYU. He's been in the public sector for 22 years. He's worked as an assistant to a city manager for 3 years, and he brings a lot of good experience to our city. And I thought the same thing, is he going to be in touch with what we actually want out here? But we put in an ordinance, the mayor and him are working side by side. So I think the mayor will be voicing very clearly to him what the expectations are. And I think that as long as the mayor's happy and willing to work with this guy, I think he's a good choice. And I think that will resolve that concern in my mind.
I don't disagree either with you. I just know that I've seen people do that. I mean, not just him, I've seen other people where because of the opportunities for their kids for certain things out there, they here and they commute or they make it work. And I guess I'm not as concerned about it because you want to do what's best. And I hope that obviously they, if the Bernal club team or whatever, if there's other opportunities or they create one out here or whatever, obviously that's what we want to push for, hopefully at some point, but sometimes you're involved in some of it's hard to get out of them.
One thing I need to make sure everybody understands too is I've talked to Scott about Ryan and how good a job Ryan's done, and Scott's 100% on board with having Ryan there. And actually even what you had our conversation with him, tell him kind of what you talked about and what his plans are.
Yeah,
To get the
I've
job.
been in contact with him all weekend, really. I got good feelings, I really do, and his intentions are good. I know we've already got a list together and we plan on hitting him hard, and hopefully I can work with him. Because I know what Roosevelt needs and I know what we want. So hopefully I can be a part of that with him and also the mayor and future mayor and whatnot. But yeah, I think he's trying. He's trying to make a change. He wants to be, he's been an assistant for however long, and I think this is his time to shine, honestly. And I believe that he'll make it work.
And he committed to me that he would have Ryan there, and he even said, if Ryan wants a couple, to tackle a few things, he says, I'm all for that. And that's the other thing is that's the other reason why, if he's here for 2 years and they go sailing, or if he's here for the long haul, he's willing to train those around him. And he's willing to, he wants to take Ryan immediately to the manager training. So my feeling is he's not, no matter what he does, he's not going to leave us high and dry. And we're not out a whole lot if we work this out instead of the severance and those types of things. To me, it's a good option, I guess, but I won't.
So Grant, I had a question on Rick's thing. If he writes a letter saying he is supportive or however of hiring him while he's the department head, would he need to say, I would recommend to whoever when I'm gone to the next department head, would he need to include that at all?
We can put that in there. I don't see a problem with it. It wouldn't be binding.
No, it's not binding. Just if you put that in. So your recommendation is if we make a motion that we offer the salary and in 6 months we would evaluate the other pieces. What about the 2-week vacation?
I think that's something you would need to do down the road. And we looked up the policy. I really like Dustin's idea. The policy is at 3 months, so if you're comfortable with that, I think I would go with it. It does say there can be special exceptions where you would set it at 6 if you would rather, but I would recommend keeping it the same.
So the policy says 3 months to evaluate, and then,
Generally, all employees serve a 3 month.
so we could evaluate in 3 months, and then by then hopefully we can tweak the code enough to put in those pieces, but then have a letter from Rick saying that he's supportive of that to keep the retirement.
I like that idea. So let's do, as part of the motion, we could say that we can have an evaluation in 3 months and have some of those provisions in, he still wouldn't get the raise until 6 months.
I agree with that, sir.
So we, the further we do an evaluation in 3 months, we would have things worked out to where we could offer something. At 6 months, then he would get, because that's even kind of an agreement, but he would get raised to the 115,000. We would have a letter from the current chief stating that he would keep him on, and then we work that out. I honestly think he would be okay with that. And I think that's a good compromise.
I just wanted to clarify to make sure there's still kind of what you felt like the motion should be. And I like the 3 months too. I think that's a good time frame.
My thought was just to get those things that we need to iron out with our ordinance, the time frame when we would have those done. So 3 months works even better.
But
I just
also,
think 6.
I agree, I was supportive of your 6 months, but if the policy is 3, I think we do the 3. But like Melissa
And then
and Jared said,
raise it to
6 months would be the pay raise evaluation. So we could get a couple
And that's
things
not
done.
promising anything. That's just saying we will evaluate. And of course, if he's doing a job, we're going to pay.
The issue that we'll have, whether we could create a contract or not in the future, we can't promise that he'll be hired as a police officer for 2 to 6 weeks.
Right.
And so that even if we could create a contract now, we don't have that ability to
And
promise
I think
that.
he's okay. I think he knows, and it would be pretty much, I don't think there would be a big hang up with, even if somebody were new, saying, yeah, we'll do that as a courtesy. I don't think that would be that.
Well,
big of a deal.
I think you made a good point though, the pay difference is much better. It's a win-win for both sides.
60 to 70,000 versus a couple of thousand, and with no extra liability on our part is a really good position for us to be in. I don't think we're gonna find this type of I can see you squinting.
Well, I'm
You're
just
not
thinking,
rolling your eyes yet.
I'm not yet. I save that for special meetings. I was just thinking it through about this. We can't guarantee recertifying as public safety because that would be ultimately the department head.
No, we could say that. We just couldn't. We could guarantee with a letter from Rick his recertification. What we couldn't is who knows when he's, when he quits.
When
or
or if that
whatever.
happens.
Right, that's what I'm talking about being recertified, sorry. Not being a reserve officer, but
Okay.
his request to be recertified as public safety for the retirement. Because we don't know if Rick will be the department head at that time. So I have concerns telling him that that will probably be fine, but it would be up to the department head and we
Oh,
don't
he's
know.
watching right now, so we can just tell him,
Yeah.
that's not something we can promise, but we'll do our best to.
That may be a big problem for him. So we should have a plan B or something, or you know what I'm saying?
He
Because he was
said
pretty
We
clear,
can call him.
okay, he was pretty clear with me that these are,
If we, in 3 months or.
Is it appropriate to call him and have him answer that question?
I think that would put the city in a bad situation if we did put something like that in the contract with a grant, because
I don't see why
like
we
a
can't.
quid pro quo, he works for the city manager, does he not?
yeah,
And so we're making a contract, we're entering in a contract, if we did end up putting something together, that, let me finish, that it would say the employee that works for me is gonna have to hire me for 6 weeks when I decide to leave
oh,
the city.
I understand your concern. However, that is why the police department, city manager, city attorney, treasurer, and the recorder are all appointed by the council, hired and fired by the mayor and the council. So there could be no quid pro quo because
oh,
we have to hire or fire the department head. So I get what you're saying, but the good thing in this situation is the manager can't fire the chief of police. And in
Oh.
fact, yeah,
you're right, they're not their supervisor,
correct.
the mayor is.
Well, he's the supervisor.
He
He is the supervisor.
Oh, he
but
is the
can't
They
fire.
get fired.
Right, and so if there was
Oh.
any concern, obviously those would be brought through Melissa or to the council, and no termination or long-term action could be,
Can you give the police chief a pay raise? without the city council approval?
No, in fact, actually, I read in state code and all statutory appointments should be an ordinance approved by, so that's probably something we need to look at almost immediately. So no,
Yeah, and I don't think there would be.
That's a good thought, though.
it is, and that's valid. That's one of the things I thought. I didn't want there to be a conflict
Yeah, for sure.
with that.
Okay, anyway, so I just wanted to bring up the fact that saying like, yeah, probably, but not guaranteed, may be an issue, for him. And maybe that's fine if we go ahead and make that offer to him and let him respond.
Yeah, we could make
But-
that offer
You know
like
what I
that,
mean?
and then if he says, no, that's not, then it's not.
Yeah, and then,
And that, I mean, that's okay. That's the thing, is we're making an offer.
Well, if we change our ordinance in the future, so we can have a contract, even though it might not be as good for the city, we can put a severance package in.
The other thing, and I brought this up to Grant today as well, is even if maybe the chief of police at the time wouldn't want to do that. Maybe there was some reason why, I don't know. There are several agencies around Duchesne County
Mhm.
Sheriff's Department or another one in Vernal that could possibly hire him for that amount of time and allow him to do that as a courtesy. I mean, we have relationships with Duchesne County, we have relationships with Vernal City. I do with the mayor and the city manager. So I feel like there is an avenue I mean, even though we couldn't promise it hard, like set in stone, it's still something that I think is very possible. Like it's, there's several avenues that go
yeah,
down.
I agree with that. I can't say it not happening.
So I guess, I'm getting some mix. So I guess the thing is, first of all, how do we do this? All right, so I'm going to officially present Scott for appointment, and then we'll do a motion for the salary after, okay? So then I can at least get the billing for food. So I'm gonna present Scott to be appointed as the next city manager.
On the salary, for the motion, would we need to include the 6-month evaluation for a raise, or is that?
I believe,
I would recommend that you just say that, what was the title on that policy, Melissa? Just probation?
Probationary period.
I would just expressly state that it applies to him, and then you can specify 6 months under that policy. But so then we have something that's in writing that we're relying on.
Mhm.
3 months and.
Well, you can specify 6 months for the whole thing. There are provisions at the end of the policy where you don't have to follow the 3 months. And so if you're wanting to review salary at 6 months,
Mhm.
I would just do it under that, yeah, here it is. Go down just a little bit, because I think the part we're looking at is on the next page.
That's that
Okay,
last
department
sentence.
heads can have extended probationary periods as they deem appropriate upon approval of the city manager. Where this is with the city manager, we already have stuff saying, like for the vehicle lease policy, all those, that you guys have to approve their participation.
So we
in
could
the
set
policy.
2 probationary periods. We could set one at 3 and one at 6, like we talked about.
Or you could just do it all at 6 or all at 3.
I like the 3 month because that gives us a little time frame to work with and to put some of this stuff together fairly quickly. Then we can do it because we need to do that anyway, whether it's Scott or somebody else, we really kind of need to do
I
that.
think that's the faith you were talking about, if we're committed to try to get that done in 3 months.
And really, he doesn't lose money. If his family's, I guess, if he buys a home, then, within 6 months, it's a big deal. But if he waits
But
6
not-
months to buy a home.
Not if he can still retire and he's still certified, because even after 6 months, if he can retire, that's one of his big concerns. And so if we can kind of facilitate that with a letter from Rick saying, as long as I'm here, you can be a reserve officer and those types of things, then that mitigates his risks that way, and that's what he's trying to do. So
So you're thinking the motion should be 3 and 6?
I think that's,
Evaluation at 3 months for
contract
contract
negotiation.
negotiations and 6 months for a salary increase.
And when we say contract negotiation, we're talking about only the things he's asked for, correct?
Nothing more.
Okay.
Sorry, Scott, nothing more.
Okay. I'm just gonna make sure I got it right for the offer letter, because that kind of opens the whole
Yeah, the vacation.
vacation and, okay.
I would make that motion that we do the 3 months and take care of the vacation and the other.
You are.
the-
Did you want to
your
officially say,
certification,
yes,
and then-
we'd go with
Yeah,
Scott?
let's make a motion to either approve the appointment or not, so if somebody wants to.
I'll move that we approve the appointment.
Okay, we have a second by Vince Riley, and let's do a roll call vote. Alan Boozenbark,
Aye.
Vince Riley.
Aye.
David Baird. Aye. Dustin White.
Aye.
And Cody Allen. Aye. Okay. Now,
I'll move that we do the probationary period, 3 months to negotiate the
a contract,
a contract agreement for the, do I need specific?
vacation,
Vacation and the URS certification, and
correct,
it's 6 months for the salary increase.
correct. And that his salary will begin at 110,000
Salary begin
and a
110,000
potential increase to 115 at the
upon
the probationary
probationary period
period being
approval.
I'll
You
second.
get all that, Lee?
No, but it's fine, I'll listen to it back on the audio.
Thank you.
I absolutely did not.
Melissa, did we miss anything that we needed to have?
So the motion is that we approve the pay at 110,000, that there'd be a 3-month probationary period, in which case we will negotiate the 2-week vacation days and the URS certification. And at 6 months, we would evaluate for the pay raise to 115,000. Is that
Yep,
help?
got it.
Okay. That's my motion.
I'll second it.
Motion by Councilman Boozenbark and second by Councilman White. Roll call vote.
Aye.
Councilman Boozenbark,
Aye.
Vince Riley,
Aye.
David Barrett. Aye. Dustin White.
Aye.
And Cody Allen.
Aye.
Okay, unanimous. So, we have now appointed a new city manager if he accepts
Acceptance.
the term. So, and that's all contingent on acceptance. So, would it be appropriate to have Melissa, I guess he's watching, but do you want to contact him?
Sure, you bet,
And we'll still want to do an offer.
of course,
Yeah,
Too, which one is cool.
of course.
okay,
So what I'll likely do, if it's all right, is call him tonight
Yep.
and kind of give him a rundown of this, answer any questions he may have from listening.
Yeah.
And then I'll draft an official offer letter, Grant, send it to you for review. And then I'll send it his way.
And
And I'll work with Rick
Okay, great.
on the letter from the police department. Can,
Well, I do one, then you review it.
that'll work. Will you forward his email to me and Rick?
Yeah.
So that Rick can look at that, it'll give you something to get.
Just with his requirement, with what he's asking for? Yeah, I'll do it right now.
I've had to work with URS. I know it's a pain in the butt. Sorry, it's on camera, but they don't. Well,
It's
I
super.
quit at the high school, went to the college, but they're still on URS. So if I retire, I have to sit out a year or else
Mhm.
I don't get any retirement. It's ridiculous. And
They're extremely particular.
Yeah, they are very, and teachers used to do it back in the day. Tana Dunsmore, well, I don't know if it's Tana, anyway, we had teachers do it.
we have Cody Allen's need to leave. We don't have anything else on our agenda tonight. Unless there's any further discussion on anything, would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Councilman White, second by Councilman, we'll give it to Alan.
Since he's gotta go.
Since he's gotta go. And all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Matt.
Yeah,
Yeah,
thanks, guys.